Those are just a few minutes. Is there a It's not. So you call talking about. Welcome everyone. Thanks for coming tonight. June meeting of the Central Oregon Writers Guild coming out in this beautiful weather that we're having. I'm Mike Cooper. I'm the president of the Writers Guild. I'm going to just go over some events and such that we have on the website here, and we'll have our featured reader, and then we'll have a presentation from Laura Stanfill. So I am sharing this, right? Everyone can see that. This is the landing page to the Central Oregon Writers Guild website. On the left side of the page, we have our event. So here's Laura, Keys to the Castle, Primary Developmental Editing that we'll talk about tonight. Laura is also going to do a workshop this Sunday, June 15th, 1 to 4 p.m. in this room. There is still room. As a member of the Central Oregon Writers Guild, you get to come to these workshops for $10, which is about, I don't know, $190 less than you normally pay for a workshop like that. So we try and keep our dues low, and we try and keep these workshops pricing low, so that we can get lots and lots of people educated in the world of writing. I think this thing on Sunday is going to be fantastic. I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to hearing Laura talk tonight too. In July. So only when we do workshops, they're in this room on paper. Laura's probably going to have some slides or something, but we don't Zoom those or record it. So it's a be here or be square. July we've got Meg Pinter. In August we have Grace Bielecki. September, Jennifer Perrine. She's also going to do a workshop in September. October, Deborah Fraze. November, Sherry Kephart. Also another workshop from Carrie. And then December, we have our holiday potluck where we'll do member readings and bring food and hang out in here and have a lot of fun. If you missed a meeting or want to go back and look at another meeting, or there's a topic that is of interest to you, all of our past meetings from the beginning of COVID are on here, the recordings, okay? So once we started doing virtual, we started recording, so these go all the way back. So there's some great topics in there. Peruse those at your leisure, and you can skip around, fast forward, and do all kinds of stuff. The right side of the landing page has all the events that we know of in Central Oregon. Okay, if you know of one that I don't have on here, email me and let me know, and we'll put it on here. Okay. There is quiet writing every Tuesday. We did this morning. We're having a lovely time upstairs, Meyer Classroom. We meet at 9:30, talk for a little bit, 15 minutes or so, and then we just write till 11 o'clock. Barber Library, I think, is probably still doing it. That you might want to check on for sure to see if they're still doing it in the summer. I know that the Shut Up and Write is still happening on Wednesdays at what is now called Fox and Fern Coffee. It used to be Cavista Coffee on Century Drive, right? So great opportunity to just go somewhere and write. I find these things to be really, really helpful, because if I sit down at my house and start to write, I will end up doing laundry or finding snacks or emails or whatever it is. But if I say to myself, I'm taking my laptop and I'm just going to write, I get a lot done. So the rest of these, so here we are on June 10th. We've got Crane Castlebaum monthly does these poetry play shops. We've got some author readings. Grace Bielecki, who's going to be joining us in a little bit, is going to occur later on this year. Is going to do a Zoom meeting here through the library on June 13th. 14th, the program that I and Irene, my wife, and Ellen Santacero run, 10-month online writing program, The Forge. We are just finishing up that program. We started in September and it's just finishing up now. And so we have 7 of our 8 smithies, we call them, are going to be reading here in this room on Saturday at 3 o'clock. If you're interested in a long-term writing program, or if you just want to hear some really good writing, please join us. There is cake involved, so if you just like cake, just come for the cake. Okay. Third Thursday spoken word nights, both Redmond and Bend. More author readings, nature poetry at the Sun River Library on June 21st. Blank Pages Writing Salon, and that's an online writing salon. We generally send out a prompt. People write a page and a half. We get together on Zoom, we read, we applaud wildly, we have a wonderful time, and then we just go our separate ways. It's a nice opportunity to share your work and get a little positive feedback on that. Another event with Crana, more author readings, and then we're into July. Paulina Springs has a poetry gathering at the beginning of every month. And yeah, I'll just let you look through that stuff. Something that is coming up that's super cool. Is our Central Oregon Writers Conference. So, and that's Trish, which is the cheerleader for the Central Oregon Writers Conference. So that's happening October 17th through the 19th at the River House here in town. We've got a great lineup of instructors. You can get on here and take a look at the workshops, the authors, industry experts, and you can register right here. If you register before July 1st, it's $50 off the price of registration. We also have a Central Oregon Writers Guild discount code for another $50. So that's pretty good because the total is around $4.95, is that right?
$4.95.
Yeah, so that's super reasonable for a 3-day writing conference, and lots of really good people. Oh,
So we choose from 24 workshops so far. If we get enough people, we're going to put together another tier, I guess you might want to say, of workshops of another 12 workshops. But right actually we have 24 workshops to choose from, so you can go to these.
that's October 7th.
Yeah, 17th to 19th.
It's the $3.95 with that discounted price, so it's $4.95 minus the rate, includes the banquet. So if you put $395 for food, you're even without even going. Literally.
Can I come up there so that the online can hear me? The code, what is code? The code is COWG Guild. Well, so it's capital C, capital O, capital W, capital G, and then the rest of the word Guild, GILD. It's on the web page. Yeah. And just really quickly, do you mind if I tell them? Oh, sure. Oh, show them.
Purchase this. You add this to your cart, so you've already discounted $4.45, and you go to your cart. You're going to see Southern California Writers.
There is a glitch that we cannot find. We have paid professionals. This has been a nightmare. So in the background, we're creating a whole new website. There's a couple of things that are broken on this, but what I want you to know is that if you register, because I don't know that we'll have the website, so if you wait for the perfect website, you'll miss the $50 bonus or the $50 discount.
So-
You understand? So go on.
So the current company here is Southern California Writers. You're in the right place where you see that COW full. And as Trish is saying, because of the inner workings of the internet, web pages and all that, this probably won't show up as the Central Oregon Writers Conference until after July 1st. So still, I recommend if you're interested in doing, do it before July 1st, and you'll be at this page, right?
Right. It's gonna be so fun. We've been wanting to do that here. We've been wanting to have a conference here for years. The board, I've been on the board for 10 years. We've been talking about it off and on for 10 years. Like, when are we gonna be able to have this happen? And so Michael has done 40 of these conferences 60 of these conferences over the last 40 years in Southern California, and now he lives in Redmond. So he's like, let's do one here. So we've been doing this together, but he's like the expertise. So also, if you know anyone else who maybe doesn't come to meetings or they're writers and they might be interested, please invite them as well, because we need to have so many people come or we won't be able to do this again, because it costs a lot of money to put on one of these things. Just so
So
you
this
know.
is a great opportunity for talking about. It's wonderful that we're able to get this. So as Trish said, we want this one to be a success. So as I've said a million times, go to workshops, hang out with community. I teach writing, and I teach writing at the university, and I teach writing at Central Oregon Community Club. Therefore, I don't need to know anything more about writing. Right? It's not true. So I go to every single workshop that lucky that I'm the president of this thing. I go to our workshops, but I love it. And so I really encourage it. It stimulates your writing. And if you come in with an open mind, you will learn lots and lots of stuff.
Thank you.
Okay. It's probably because I'm not very hearing. Sorry.
Day of the conference?
October 17th through the 9th. And on this page that we're looking at right now, if you look down at the bottom, you'll see that there's that code. COW.
Yeah. Yeah, COWGUILD. Do you need me anymore? Are we good?
No, we're good.
Okay.
And you. Right.
Yes, one of my questions, because I'm local to Southern California, I signed up.
Good.
So that answered it. And then if you sign up for the additional $50 to have a piece receipt, and will we get a separate email for that? And then will that piece you bring it to the conference? This is my first conference, so I'm
Okay, do you want me to come up there and address that? I'll talk to Mike, try not to get all over. Okay.
For what?
All over the mic. So this is how this works. The advanced submissions, eventually you'll be able to choose your top 3 who you would like to have. We're still working on the website. Normally we have this up already now, but it's going to be probably in July that we get it all up and fixed because of, we're going to have a brand new website because we just couldn't fix this one. So what's going to happen is you will be able to choose probably between 3 different people who are taking advanced submissions. Many of us who are giving workshops are already editors, like Mike does his own editing, I do editing, Denise does editing, and we have several other professional editors that are going to be there. And many of us, like I have several best-selling authors, so I do know what I'm doing, and most of us do. So you can choose between your top 3 people, and that's what Michael he's not here tonight, he hasn't been feeling well, but, that's what Michael does, is he organizes all of that, so what he'll do, like, if you pay for one submission or two or three, however many you do, and you choose your people, he makes sure they get the pages ahead of time. And they will print them out for you, and they will write comments, and so you'll likely get a copy of your piece, your 10 pages, when you're there with, you know, like I scribble all over mine. And I write,
That was my other.
yeah, it's usually 10 pages. Yes, definitely double spaced, otherwise we don't have any room to write. Are there any more questions on that, advanced submissions, and you can pay for that in the cards. So even if you've already paid for the conference and you decide later that you want to do advanced submission, then you can just go back in and pay for the advanced submission, because your name, you know, you'll fill out that information, so we'll know. Because that goes directly to Michael and he organizes all of that. Can everyone hear me?
Hope so.
What's your cell phone?
What's my what?
Your cell phone.
If you want to get a hold of Trish, you can email Central Oregon Writers Guild at gmail.com. Yes, sir. All right, any other questions about anything in the whole wide world?
I want to say that I was very pleased to receive comments back from my anthology submission, and that was wonderful. So, that's
Submit it to the anthology and you haven't got comments back, they're coming. This would be the week, we cut off submissions on 10 days ago. So you should be getting comments, and then we'll be putting that together, and we should have a book for you in early November. So we're excited about it. We got 63 ish, 61, 63, yeah. So we're gonna have another big book this year. So, yeah.
They're asking up there to please repeat the questions, because they're not hearing the questions online.
The question that Jim answered was about,
Is your mic on?
yes. It's not getting closer. So John, when you come here, all right, we all good? Okay, I'm gonna Mary Krakow is our featured reader coordinator. She's our featured reader. Yay!
Thank you. Can you hear me? Okay, so yes, I've been involved in the anthology, and, we still have about, I think there's about 10 that we don't have the editors haven't finished doing their editing yet on, and we have plenty. So, like I said, probably by this time next week, you should hear something. If you something in. Here we go. Joan Gordon has been a weaver for more years than she cares to admit. She loves being creative, whether with yarns or weaving with wire, designing something never seen before and exciting. She enjoys the multi-stage process of setting up the loom and looking forward to each step. Weaving in the weft makes the pattern come to life. It is pure magic. Losing her identical twin started her writing journey. It took her 3/4 of a year after her loss before she was able to be back at the loom creating again. The poem she will read tonight is called As a Weaver. Please welcome Joan.
just had to bring a picture of Jill and I together. You would. Weaver. Without warning, my identical twin sister Jill passed away. Can't see her or touch her. As a weaver, I'm visual and tactile, which is a big part of why this process is so incredibly hard to read. When I construct a work for the loom, I look at a variety of vivid hues and colors that will be combined into a finished piece. I can envision what the result will look like after the weft is woven in. The play of tones and values creates colorful contrasts and interest in my handmade pieces. I recognize that altogether, these mixed strands will perfectly blend and complement each other, just like wheat. I also can feel the difference between the thick, thin, smooth, and slow yarns I use. Each adds texture and variety to my weavings. The interplay becomes artistic in their arrangement and gives structure and uniqueness to the woven item. Whether mohair or cotton, all contribute something distinct to the outcome, just as we each do. I miss how well we mingled and interacted, like the threads on the loom. I recognize the resemblance the two of us had between each other. We didn't knowingly dress in almost identical matching outfits. Or I look over and realize she was standing the exact same way I was, or that I was holding my arms in the position she was. I can view in my mind us side by side as we usually stood for photos. That is one of the fun parts of being a twin. To compare and contrast the lookalike pair and notice our differences and numerous similarities. I truly long for us, the collective you and I, Jill. I remember how her love and warmth made me feel, how we encouraged, complimented, and completed each other. When apart from one another, there would be an underlying sensation that something was absent. Then, when back in each other's company, we'd get this satisfying contentment, feeling of feeling whole again. I guess you'd have to be a twin to really understand. Sadly, she is no longer physically present to reach out and connect with, but I sense her and know that she is watching over me. I just can't caress her shoulders or kiss her cheek or lips, or even hold her hand. We can no longer entwine into our own world of sharing the way we used to, a meshing of two souls united, banded, and tied together. I'd observe Jill's beautiful smile making my heart sing. I'd notice her twinkling eyes, warm, friendly demeanor, or gaze at how her hair was styled today. Is she wearing her little turquoise clip in it? I'd pay attention to the details that made her her. It was a true pleasure to share my life with someone that loving and special. But my arms aren't able to hug you today, Jill. Can't touch you. Once woven together, my threads would join, react, and intertwine on the loom, just like we did throughout our lives. I mourn our unique, complex association and twist in our relationship, which made it truly wonderful. We had an uncommon twin sixth sense way of communicating. We were much more aware of each other than most siblings are. Our close kinship was a rare bond that interlaced and entangled us. It was real and felt by us both. Jointly had, I now have to view as fond, loving memories, visualizing every detail with a renewed insight. I examined and looked into my own heart, inspecting and perceiving her absence in the void and emptiness I carried since she left. This is grief at its worst. She is no longer visible for me to see and lay my eyes on. I sadly am unable to reach out and hold her. I terribly miss you, Jill, and I miss us. Just like with my work, the only thing I can do is to grasp onto the strands of each individual situation and precious memory. I then weave in their attached emotions and clench all tightly together into a caressed, loving embrace as I reminisce us and our woven tapestry in my mind. Thank you. could say this is what there are some folks up here, I meet with wire and yarns and, thank you. They look good for me.
So please, come and look at this stuff and talk with Joan afterwards. And thank you, Joan, that was very lovely. All right, so we have Laura Stanfill going to talk to us tonight. A primer on developmental editing. Laura is also doing the workshop on Sunday, and the workshop Sunday is what's your book about, and maybe she'll talk a little bit more about that. But it's really kind of good to know what your book is about. It's good to know for communication to other people, and it's good to know for yourself. I think one of the biggest challenges that a lot of people have is they'll write something and they're not really sure what it's all about. So this will be, I'm really looking forward to the workshop and to listening to Laura tonight. So without further ado, Laura Stanfill is the author of Imagine a Door, about the craft of writing, and Singing Lessons for the Stylish Canary novel. She is the publisher of Forest Avenue Press, which she founded in 2012 in Portland, Oregon. And I just saw on social media today or yesterday, she has another book coming out next fall, 2026, fall of 26, from Wolfen Press, a book called The Neighborhood Dames. So let's welcome Laura.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining me today. I have a PowerPoint to share with you, and I will get that up right now. If I can remember how to do a slideshow. Okay. We have a lot of material to get through. While I am in screen sharing, it looks like I can't see caption, or I can't see comments. So feel free to drop comments in the chat and just know I'm not seeing them, but we'll have some time at the end to go over them.
So Laura, I'll just step in if there's a question or something, and I'll share it with you, okay?
That's perfect.
Okay.
Excellent. When I decided, Mike, I pitched you this earlier on in the year, long before I sold my new book to Hooligan Press. So and I thought developmental editing would be a good idea to talk about. It's something that I find really nerdy and enjoyable. But what I didn't know is that I would be on deadline for my own developmental edit for my book. I have 4 weeks to go through my 300 pages of my manuscript and adjust it and change it. So I'm kind of excited to share this presentation with you from that perspective, because I'm deep in my own developmental edit. And it's also my favorite thing of working with other writers. When I accept manuscripts from authors, my favorite part is the developmental edit. So there are 3 kinds of book editing. Some of you may know this, but I figured it was good to get started with. Developmental editing is the big picture. It's the overall everything. Copy editing is more at the sentence level. Sometimes it is considered separate from line editing. Sometimes people group line editing and copy editing together. But it's looking at the rhythm and the punctuation of sentences, the word choice, the voice of the story. Does it carry through? If you have multiple points of view, does each character have its own voice? Copy editors also are really good at checking the facts. I've had more than one author remark on how much detail our copy editors go to when trying to decide what the actual weather was on August 7th, 1972 in Portland, Oregon, for instance. Copy editors also look for consistency, and it's really important that they do their jobs. You probably can recognize books that have not had a good copy edit, if you come across any that are there are pieces that don't connect quite right. So the third type of editing is proofreading. And in book publishing, that's so that the developmental edit, copy edit, draft is now really publication ready. And on top of catching typos and missing punctuation and any mistakes that have been entered in when adjusting the copy edits or the developmental edit, the proofreader is also in charge of finding design flaws. One of the things I do as a designer is I miss sometimes when a couple hyphens get stacked on the right side of the page, which most readers aren't going to notice, but my proofreader notices and tells me to fix it. So we usually do final proofreading and then a final proofreading. Digging deeper into developmental edits, I'm going to see if I can. Okay, there we go. I had to adjust our Zoom screen so that I could see what was on my slide. A developmental edit, like I said, is the big picture edit. It's the most fundamental. I was talking to Jenny Forrester, who is a longtime Portlander. She lives in the Midwest now, or I guess in the West, but not here. And Jenny just came out with a book called Brilliant. And she talked the other night at a coffee shop about how when she works with authors and she gives them developmental edits and they change a sentence, how frustrating that can be, or how much she really desperately wants them to go deeper, and how we talk about that. And I think that's really at the essence of what a developmental edit is. When I send notes back to people, it's not cosmetic. It's not like, how about you curl your hair and put on some lipstick? It is a deeper dive into the scaffolding, the structure of the plot, the arcs of the characters, and what's working and what really isn't working. And I tend to feel my way through developmental edits as a reader first. Even though I'm trained in this, I really approach a new piece of work like someone who is picking it up cold and reading it for the first time, because that type of readership is what is eventually going to happen for the book when it comes out into the world. So I put a little note on this slide that I added to Vincent Chu's manuscript. He wrote a book that's set in a city, and there are different landmarks within the city. So I made this little note in one of his early pages about wanting to know the distance and the spacing around the city and where the panhandle is compared to where his apartment is and so forth. So that's pretty much components of a DE. That's I said character, plot, title is also a piece of it. Does your title do the work it should do on your book? Why or why not? That's important. And then I also think it's really important to talk about what the author should get out of a developmental edit. If you have paid money for a developmental edit, it's probably a couple $1,000s. That's pretty standard depending on the number of words, number of pages. And so you should get a lot out of it. Uh, you should get a letter that could be an informal email, but it should be structured rather formally. Or a lot of editors like to create a Word document and or a PDF and share information that way. So that developmental edit letter should include measurable goals. It should include things that you're doing well, and it should talk about the things that you could adjust as the writer to make your book better. The other piece of the developmental edit is the line comments, like this comment I have here. I find those are really important. Some editors don't do a lot. In my developmental edit from Ooligan, I don't have a lot of on the page comments. It's mostly the letter. So I just keep flipping back over to the letter and seeing what I need to do. But I also like to, as an editor, give people comments so they feel that their work has been seen. And especially when I love a certain sentence or an idea or a concept, I like to mark that again with my reader hat on, saying, oh my gosh, I love this. Or, hey, I grew up in New Jersey too. I get kind of personal because when I'm editing, it's really one person reading one person's work. All right. Um, kindness and being seen. I feel like editing is so much about making sure the person you're working with feels like their story is understood. I've had friends, and I don't know if anybody I would when I'm in person this weekend, I'll have you all raise your hands and chat with me in person. But I don't know if any of you have received edits from someone that have just felt completely off base. That really can destroy confidence for the writer. And it's also not really helpful. If someone doesn't get the work, that's not great. So I try to build trust through my developmental edits. And again, this is off of Vincent Chu's book, Nice Places. It's coming out in spring 2026. And these are little comments and they're moments of character of for me. Like I said OMG because my kids text me that all the time. It's not exactly a professional good job with this. It's not a formal comment, but these are comments I've left so that the author knows I get his work. Oh, when is a DE important? There are a couple times it's really important. When you sign a publishing contract, or actually an agent contract, you will get developmental editing. Agents tend to do big picture editing with their clients before they send their books out on submission. In the old days, it was all the editors at publishing houses that would do that. But these days, if you have an agent, that will be the person. If you work with a small press and submit directly, the publisher will offer developmental editing. If they don't, that's a red flag or a yellow flag about the quality of the press. But that being said, you might want a developmental edit before you start querying. Because what we think is on the page, what we believe we've put into our laptops or onto our pages on our notebooks might not actually be on the page. We get so wrapped up as writers, whether it's fiction or nonfiction or essays or poems, we have that picture, that story picture in our head. And just because it's really clear in our head doesn't mean that we've put everything on the page or that the idea we had for the character that shifted her arc 3/4 of the way through the book has actually carried through the beginning, the first 2/3 or 3/4. So that's a really great reason to hire a developmental editor or work with someone you know in a pages trade. One manuscript can absolutely go through several developmental edits. I have maybe worked on one manuscript with someone maybe 7 times, maybe one of my max. And that seems like a lot, but if you make radical changes and not cosmetic changes, the whole book shifts. And it hopefully shifts closer to that platonic ideal of what you want your book to be, what you've always expected your book to look like. But you don't always get there with one round. So multiple developmental edit rounds can be great. I really love working with a mix of professionals and friends. And then when I query the book, I know it will go out. And if it gets accepted somewhere, or if I get an agent, it will go through yet more rounds. So who's your editor? Who does this developmental edit work? If you have a publishing deal, great, you'll get someone assigned. You don't really get a choice. If you submit to a micro press like Forest Avenue, you get the person who runs the press. Generally, the acquisitions editor is often the publisher or the primary editor of the press. Occasionally not, but generally. You can also hire an editor. There are databases out there of excellent people, but I also highly recommend asking your friends, who have you worked with? Have you ever gotten a professional edit? And see if they'd be comfortable showing you their developmental edit letter or some of the notes, or even the first couple paragraphs of their letter or the first couple chapters of their line notes, and see if it's a style that fits with you. You can also ask a friend to do your editing, and hopefully this is somebody you know well who has written and or edited books before. You can also trade with another writer. You might find somebody through social media or through a friend, someone who has a manuscript finished around the same time as you, and you can trade pages. And that's free, just like asking a friend is. And there are some risks with that, but it's a viable option. But if you do ask a friend, just make sure whoever you ask knows how plot works, because plot is a big piece of developmental edits. So I've talked a little bit already about the two components of a DE. The letter is arguably the most important part. I think my letter from Ooligan that just came in was like, I think 11 pages, and it was broken down into subjects, and that was really helpful for me. The best part about the letter is it should always start with what's working, what the person who read the book and has feedback for you actually loves about it. Because then all the criticism goes down with some of that sugar. It doesn't hurt, it doesn't feel bitter, it feels good. Like this person read my work and loves these pieces about it and also can see how I can make it better. Because really, when we're talking about DEs, developmental edits, we're not it's not for the faint of heart. It's not for someone who wants a spit polish and shine and to get the book out exactly the way it is. You have to really want to affect change on your manuscripts. You have to be open to somebody else's perspective on it. And you have to have a little rejection resilience going on. You've got to recognize that you will be getting criticism. That's what you're looking for. And you have to be brave about it and ready to accept that. The second part, of course, are the comments and notes inside the manuscript, and these are informed by the letter. The notes on my the Neighborhood Dames book were really specific moments where a historical time or place didn't add up to where I was supposed to be in history. So those little bits where I just um vamped kind of. I it's a music book, so I can use the word vamp, like improvise. I vamped, I improvised on a couple places and moments of history because I didn't stop to look it up. And one of the developmental edit pieces was like, we just need to smooth out a couple historical moments and specifically historical language. I used mom and dad a little earlier than mom and dad would have been used. So I'm going through and they wrote in my notes, here's a mom and dad, and maybe this character will use it because she's in the later timeline, but these other characters won't use it. So I wrote this letter for a client, and I don't do a lot of developmental edits for pay just because I don't have time, but I really enjoy it. And I wanted to share this as what a developmental edit should look like. You've written a tremendous novel, a love letter to family, to Jewish culture in Chicago at the turn of the century, and for all those readers whose relatives came over from Eastern Europe to make a life in the US. You've also framed this story, and I will talk more about this, as an investigation of women's lives and how duties and teachings are passed between generations of women, or not, and how grandmother, mother, daughter, granddaughter relationships grow and change as the world changes. I think that's an important theme and worth focusing this revision on even more so than you already have. If I had to sum it up, I'd probably say it's a coming of age tale about a young Jewish woman in Chicago at the start of the 20th century and how she changes as the world around her changes. Now um, that manuscript note, it's not formal, particularly, it's not fancy. I could have probably spent more time writing the specifics, but I told her what I saw in the book, which speaks to audience and lets her know that I think there is an audience out there for the book. I think people would want to read this. And so in starting a developmental edit letter that was very much about point of view and structure and working on the arcs of the story, I wanted her to feel seen. Here's another example. This is wonderful. Uh, I actually did developmental edits on this in trade with my book designer. And we did 2 rounds of work together before, just for trades, just for through friendship manuscript trades. And then she asked if I would be interested in publishing it. And usually that doesn't happen, but she really wanted to work with a small press, and I couldn't think of anybody I would have rather worked with. Plus, I had already done 2 rounds of edits with her, and I knew it was in really good shape. So when I wrote her developmental edit letter the second time, I did not know I was going to publish it. But I wrote this: Dearest Gigi, you've done it. Because the first one, I struggled with some of the plot points and with the story of the protagonist, and she solved all my problems. You wrote a noir detective novel that plays with tropes, delights, and intrigues, and also offers a deep commentary on the nature of time, ethics, and how society these days is so much about watching other people. So again, I tried to tell her, I see this book, and also your revision did what it needs to do. Congratulations. And then from then on, of course, I had more notes and edits and specific criticisms. But like I said, saying something delightful and sweet and true about the book helps the criticisms be part of a framework instead of feeling bitter or uncomfortable. They feel like they're part of this joy that I had in reading the book again. So here's an example of a critique piece. And again, this is from Vincent Chu's Nice Places, which is about a tech executive who quits his job to travel the world. Only he gets robbed and he ends up not getting his train. And it's a delightful twist on the expat novel. I think that's why I fell in love with it. And if you're coming on Sunday, I will definitely be talking more about how the twist in that premise really got me excited as an editor, an acquisitions editor, and how he talked about the story in his query. But here's one of the things I wrote to him about the draft he submitted and my first round of edits. One thing I've started tracking, at least in the early chapters, is moments where you reveal something late in the scene. And mostly that works, but in a few places I'm suggesting getting it on the page earlier. I want to honor the surprise of the information when it comes, and in lots of cases it's a fun reveal, but I'm also looking for places where I'd feel more in the scene if you gave a beat of description in there. I'm also pointing out places where you can add a tiny bit about the mom's neighborhood and Georgie's neighborhood. How far away do they live? A sentence or two about what the streets look like when Georgie's leaving his apartment will do wonders for setting up the panhandle life as being nearby but completely different, and so on. This, to me, feels key to developmental edits. Every book has different weaknesses and strengths. Something I used to do as a younger novelist is I always wanted to withhold information. And my early writing teachers, Stephen Allred and Joanna Rose, used to say that it was like pushing a car uphill. If you're going to make the reader work extra hard, there needs to be a payoff. You need to get to the top of the hill and the story just has to take off. Otherwise, you've made them push a car uphill for no reason. And so Vincent's novel was pretty close to being what it needed to be, but there were a couple places where I felt like the withholding was getting in the way of me being engaged in the story in the way I wanted to. I made a slide about the neighborhood dames, which thankfully was just announced by, well, again, like Mike said when he introduced me, it was just announced yesterday. So I did bring some thoughts about it, but I'm also excited. I can now tell you it's getting published by Ooligan. I wanted that news out first. So I started writing this in 2018. I was at the Mineral School residency in Washington. It's Mineral Washington. It's an old school, highly recommend. And in my room, there were chalkboards. And so I mapped out my story on the chalkboard. And over time, then eventually I wrote a draft, and I brought pieces to Southern Oregon every summer, and I read bits and pieces to the women's retreat group there. I had my neighbor read the full manuscript, and she loved it, and I thought, okay, this is a book. Then my agent read it and sent comments back. She didn't love it or quite understand it, so I ended up gently and lovingly breaking up with my agent over this book, which made me really scared it would never get published and that it wasn't any good. And my first publisher also rejected it without notes, and I never explained why. So I was sitting on some negative feedback that didn't have any developmental edits attached or any real reasons. Um, so meanwhile, I hired Susie Vitello, who is now an editor at Sibylline Press, and she did a developmental edit for me, and she returned a printed version in a binder, and it has, if I can find it, I'll bring it this weekend to show those of you who are in the room. But it's this big thick binder, and she hole punched everything, and she put the letter in there, and then all the line edits are handwritten on the pages. I also had a college student read it because she was looking for experience in publishing, and I thought I should she would be a good candidate to read this book and see if she thinks it's YA, because it's not YA, but that was some comment I had. So after all of that and making adjustments as I went over a number of years, I started submitting about a year ago, and I got an acceptance, and I got my developmental edit letter on May 23rd, and it is due on June 23rd. So, oh, see here, I couldn't tell you unofficially, whisper, whisper, actually it's Ooligan, hooray. Um, Also, it's okay to cry. This is a slightly blurry photo of me from my kids' graduation because it seemed appropriate. Because if you're asking someone to really dig in deep to the rib cage of your book and to open up those ribs and get to the heart and maybe pull that heart out and rearrange it can hurt. It can feel really hard to digest. And I just wanted to normalize that we have big feelings as writers, and it's okay if it feels hard. You can put it away. You can deal with it later. Um, you can go back and ask more questions to the editor. And if it's completely off base, you can say, okay, that's fine. This actually is not helpful to me, and that's all right too. Chances are, if you've vetted a paid developmental editor, if you found a freelancer who gets your work and you're excited to work with, it'll be worthwhile, but you might have to cry, and that's okay. So what happens when you get a developmental edit letter back? Something that I like to do first is read everything. I may not read it all at once. Usually I dip in and read those first paragraphs of my developmental edit letter because I'm pretty sure they're going to be good. That's the standard. It's supposed to be good feedback in the beginning. So I can read that and feel like, okay, they love the historical setting, or oh, this character is working really well. And then I can read a little further down and start to see the criticism, what I didn't nail, what I need to fix. From there, I go through the manuscript and look at the notes on the pages to see what else I need to work on or any specifics that the letter had mentioned. Um, it's nice to pinpoint those on a page and look on like page 127. There is an example of me using a word that was not historically appropriate. So that's great. That's a specific that I can connect with the letter, and I can fix that pretty easily. When you're evaluating what you can do with your developmental edit, what you want to do, it's really necessary to know that you don't have to do it all. You get to choose. This is your book. If you've hired an editor, of course you get to choose. If your friend read it or you traded manuscripts with another writer in your community, you also get to choose. If you sold your book or signed a contract with an agent and that person has sent you feedback, you still get to choose. It's still your book. The power dynamic's a little different when someone is counting on you doing a revision for them. And I tend to lean towards saying yes at those times. But I also always want to center what feels right. If someone has a significant change, I need to know that feels right. My debut novel, Singing Lessons for the Stylish Canary, came out in 2022 from Lanternfish Press in Philadelphia. And I knew the ending wasn't working. And the manuscript that sold was a fixed version of that ending. I kind of made it shorter. I got rid of 150 pages and rewrote to fit there. But the new ending was not as thoughtfully constructed, nor was it as carefully written as the first 2/3 of the book. So in retrospect, I should have done a little more work on that last third of the novel before I tried sending it out. And I was really lucky that somebody picked it up and loved it. But my editor, Christine, said, you have to make this ending more connected to the rest of the book. And here are some ideas and here are some thoughts. And it was heavy. There was a lot to do. And I checked my gut right away, and my gut was, I've never gotten this ending right. But she sees what it can be, and she sees how I can do it. And I didn't follow all her suggestions, but I knew she was right and she was onto something, so I did the work. Another piece is what solutions pop into your brain. When you read a piece of criticism, sometimes it's like, oh yeah, well, of course, I knew this. I had a scene in The Neighborhood Dames where George the father is being mean. And I knew he was being mean just because someone from society knocked on his door and he felt obligated to carry on, to take this woman's anger and to act on it and to do what she asked of him. But I knew he wasn't that person and he couldn't go through with it. But when my editors at Hooligan Press read the book, they were like, yeah, this is an issue. And they actually believed George, my character, was going to be awful. And in my head, I was like, but of course he's not awful. He's actually a good guy. He's just trying to like make peace with the neighborhood. Um, and so that developmental edit critique, my solution popped right into my brain. And I knew how I was going to fix it. I was just going to cut that piece out and adjust the arc and make it better. And I have done that so far. I only have 13 days left to finish the other pages, but I've done that part. And then with your letter and with the notes on your manuscript, what do you disagree with and why? And then you can dig into your motivation. Is the why something that you're stuck on? It's just because it's always been this way. Sometimes titles get like that. If someone says your title's not right, here's a suggestion, you can get really stuck on keeping your existing title. And it's good to explore the why behind it. Is that because you've called it by this name for 3 years? Or is it because this is really the right title and this is what you think? Being able to negotiate with yourself and run all of the critique information through yourself is really helpful. And it's essential because you do not want to take developmental edits and just do what someone else thinks your book should be. It's a balance. It's really a conversation between the reader who has worked on your book and given you this critique and you, the writer, the origin of these pages. The title is a big thing that changes. This is an example of a book that I published, it feels like a million years ago. It was 2014. I think it was our second novel we ever published. And it came into me as Skin Drag. And again, I would raise hands or do comments, but I can't see anybody. So I'm curious if anybody knows what skin drag is. It's a physics term. And you learn that later in the novel, but my designer said, you know, skin drag, I don't like the title. It sounds like skin tag. And I felt like I didn't like the title because it wasn't beautiful in the way some of the language in the novel was beautiful, despite it being a sad story. And so the questions we worked on were, does the title represent the concept, the tone, or the idea? And the answer with Skin Drag was no. So my author and her wife did a presentation to people and asked them for their favorite titles of a list of possibilities that Kate had put together. And Carry the Sky by far was the winner in terms of being compelling, matching the tone of the book, and carrying the idea forward. Sometimes we put titles on our manuscripts that get explained 3/4 of the way in, but it's not going to help someone pick it up from the bookshelf. So developmental editors should always question the title and ask questions about it, or say, I think this really works and here's why. Skin drag, for instance, on this novel would have made no sense with the description of the book, unless we had said skin drag, comma, a physics concept is about blah, blah, blah. And that's super awkward and not helpful. So sections in the developmental letter for the Neighborhood Dames, I went through what Ooligan sent me, and they gave me 4 sections in my letter: organization and plot. So that's the big picture. Characterization got deeper into individual people, imaginary people I had put on the page. Historical accuracy and tone, I talked about a little bit. And then they had an in conclusion. All the way through, they said this is a light developmental edit. We don't have a lot to work on here, but here are the things. And so every developmental letter may or may not have these topics, or they may have different topics, or I sometimes write them in long rambling paragraphs without markers, and that's all valid, but I kind of like this format of having these subheads, because when I went back to start working on the book, I can easily flip back and forth between the sections and find what I'm looking for. And I actually quoted here part of my developmental edit letter. It's abundantly clear that you've done your research when it comes to this era. Further descriptions of the characters and settings, as well as embedded documents like newspaper articles, evoke the progressive era where the story takes place. These details are aided by context that allows readers to readily picture the setting and follow the story. For instance, the mention of deodorant powder on page 172 is a fantastic detail. So, and then there are a few places we fact check. I already talked about that. So you get the idea that that it was a really helpful thought, that most of the time what I've done and works for them, and here is a specific moment in time it works, and also we found these inconsistencies. So that's a great example. It's okay to make small changes on a developmental edit. I talked before about the cosmetic piece and how the biggest risk of a developmental edit is you get big picture suggestions and then you change a line or two. But sometimes it's really hard if you have worked on your book for a long time. It's really hard to open it up and mess it up and make big changes, especially if you're working with a publisher or an agent who requests track changes. This right here is a mess. I can barely even look at it. And that's also how I am expected to complete my developmental edit for Ooligan. When I got to a big change that I needed to do, I took the chapter out of this document with track changes, and I put it into a new document, and I turned off track changes, and I just wrote a new chapter. Pieces of the previous chapter, I think, were still in there, but I decided I had to make so much change, I had to make so much mess, that it made me feel better to pull it into a separate document and then return it as an entirely changed chapter, because otherwise it would have been really hard for me to open it up that deeply and change that much. In fact, that was one of the scenes where George had the conflict, the father had the conflict, and was gonna be really mean and angry, and I needed to change that. With traditional publishing, the acquisitions process moves into developmental editing. They kind of go hand in hand. The acquisitions team reads the book, they pitch the book, it gets accepted, and then developmental edits happen. It's pretty 1-2. After the developmental edits, then come copy edits and proofreading and marketing and covers all come in at the same time. But acquisitions to developmental editing. And like I said, a conversation between two parties that are both invested in the future of the work. If you have sold your book or if you have signed an agreement with an agent, there's a financial or time investment there. If you are publishing on your own or doing it DIY, author publisher style, then hopefully you can find someone who will do a developmental edit with you and have that conversation with you so you can make sure your book is ready to go. Paying for a developmental edit. The developmental edit should still be a conversation, even when money is exchanged. You are the client as the writer. The editor is your employee. That being said, the editor knows more about the process and what makes a book work than you do. That's why you're hiring them. And often they come in with information that you wouldn't be able to find on a website or you wouldn't be able to find in your writing group, especially if it's somebody who's been trained and who has edited books that have sold to publishers and have gotten representation from agents. Professional developmental edits are expensive. It's when I look at how much money I make from different places, that one developmental edit I did earned me probably more than a lot, maybe. This is sad, but I've been doing a lot of consulting and I run a publicity group and I do metadata support for publishers. And I think that one developmental edit, which took 4 or 5 weeks, earned me more money than all of those other side gigs combined. It costs money, but you're not just buying the person's time, you're buying their insights and their understanding. Every single book I've worked on goes into the book developmental edit that I do. It's not I'm just a good editor, but it's that I've worked on books that have gotten to market and I have that understanding of the market. You also have to be ready to revise significantly or it's not going to be worth your money or your time. And then even the best book and the most polished prose can benefit from outside eyes. As Forest Avenue has gotten bigger, I've had more authors come in with like picture perfect manuscripts. They're beautiful, they're well done. And I still go through and do a developmental edit because there are probably still things that need to be changed. And if not, it's just full of lots of love comments, and that's okay too, and some small edits. My book Imagine a Door came out on April 1st, and I started writing and reviewing in 2016, published it through my press because it made sense financially. I did a grant proposal for this book and I planned to have one developmental editor, and that's what I based my financial goals on for this grant. I got the grant, which was exciting. I got $5,000 from Regional Arts and Culture Council here in the Portland metro area. But then after my first edit was finished, I did so much work, so much big picture work and moving things around that I hired another developmental editor, which was like another big chunk of change that came out. And then after that, I was still anxious about my section on distribution. I wanted to make sure that somebody who did not know about small presses and how distribution works could understand it, that I had used enough language and terminology that was accessible, that I wasn't doing any insider baseball type chat. And so I hired a third editor. So that book has cost me a lot of money. It's also 522 pages and it's a chunk. Okay. But it was worth it because I would have hated to print 522 pages without having it very carefully edited. Doing it through Forest Avenue definitely made me more anxious. I think that's why I needed 3 developmental editors. And like I said, the printing was really expensive because the book was so thick. I have 75 authors, editors, and publishers quoted. It's not just my voice for 500 pages. And then I still went to copy edits and proofreading after that to make sure. And I like this photo because it looks like real me. This is not social media me. This is like, holy crap, I'm standing in front of my book. It's a real thing and people are reading it. It also was a Portland bestseller according to Willamette Week. And I love this because so often small presses get set to the side, and here I am with big names. That was exciting. To review a developmental edit should be deep work. I have rewritten whole swaths of my book because someone has made one suggestion that made sense. Cutting 150 pages of the ending was one of those. You might need to make small changes just to get started. Remember that very messy page I showed you? That's a trick I use when I'm being too careful, when I don't want to mess anything up. In changing a word in a sentence, or changing a sentence, cutting a sentence, changing a verb, that often is enough to allow me to make the bigger changes. It gives me the permission. The manuscript is no longer perfect, not that it ever was, but it's something we can open up and move and play around with once a couple of those sentences are shifted. And the more you can mess around with it, the easier it'll be to see the cracks and broken parts. Another great way to work on your developmental edits or your manuscript at any stage is to go ahead and change the font. If you get used to reading the same paragraphs over and over again and admiring them or tweaking a little thing here and there, if you change the font or change the size of the margins, the words aren't going to line up the same way. It's going to look like a fresh book, a new book, a different book than the one that you keep polishing. And that can be helpful too. Sometimes a book gets offered a deal and it needs a lot of developmental edits. When I started my company, I did a couple editing rounds, big picture rounds with some of my authors because I could see what I loved about the books. I could see the value and the potential in the story, but it wasn't ready to go. And so I would sign them and then I would do like a couple developmental edits. And at the time, we didn't have the reputation or brand that we do now. And so I had that option that I could pick a book that wasn't quite ready and sign it and then work directly with the author until we both loved the result. But now because I have a lot more submissions and I'm doing my own writing as well, I'm more inclined to do a revise and resubmit. Agents and editors offer R&Rs when they see the value in your work, but they also see it's not ready for prime time yet. And that's a great time to bring in a developmental editor or a friend. What they really want with a revise and resubmit is a full big picture edit. They don't want you to change a couple sentences here and there and send it back, or cut one character and send it back. They're really looking for a big break it open and rewrite. So here is our last slide. I'm pretty up. I don't know how we're doing on time because I can't see anything. But I'll go through these slides and then we'll open it up for questions if that works for everyone. The keys to your castle. The plot we've talked about. Does it work? Does it not work? Are there pieces that make sense? Is it believable? Are there saggy spots? One of the great pieces of advice I've gotten over the years was from mystery author Dana Haynes, who said that he writes on a notebook, and if something doesn't happen on the page of the notebook, he crosses that out and he writes another page. He wants something to happen plot-wise on every page. So that's a great reason to have a developmental edit. Scenes, same thing. Does something happen in each one? I have heard writers talk about a valuation concept, where you value the emotional tone of your story, scene by scene. So, for instance, you have two characters who get together and they fight. That would be a negative. And then maybe they make up. That would be a plus. Um, what what tone does the scene have? Is it sometimes you can have an equal scene where a scene crosses over into the next scene and it things stay the same. But if you have a book of things staying the same, it doesn't have a lot of plot. So you want to be minimal on those scenes where no values change and you're really looking for, oh, there's this moment of up. It's like, woohoo, this person won this big game, but then they go home and something horrible's happened, or their partner calls and breaks up with them, or whatever the scene is. So you have a plus and then you have a minus, and things can go up and down in value. You'll want to, sorry. Character, are they changing or growing? And you want your developmental editor to look at multiple characters and voice. I don't, sorry, we keep changing slides here. The voice, is it consistent? Does your voice change if you have multiple point of view characters? If you have a Vietnam vet character and an 18-year-old computer hacker character in the same book, they're going to have different voices, and you want that to show in your language and the word choice, not just because you say it's this character, because you let the reader know that the character's speaking. They have to have different voices. Organization is huge. Is your book chronological or by theme? If you've written a memoir, is it a standard beginning to end chronology, or does it skip around? Is it a hybrid of memoir and poetry? Does the organization make sense to the reader? That's only something an outsider can answer for you. And then you can decide if you like their answer. The title, if it matches your content, is it original? Does it seem confusing, like Skin Drag did to me? Does it sound different than other things that are on the market? Or does it sound similar? Singing Lessons for the Stylish Canary used to have a much shorter title, but the editors at Lanternfish said magical, historical, whimsical books like yours all have long titles right now, so your book needs a long title. And then the ending, does it fulfill the promises set up in the beginning of the book? Is there a natural conclusion? Do you tie all the pieces together? Or if you're going to leave an open ending, do you still at least touch some of those pieces so the reader doesn't feel like they've been left in the lurch? So there you go. That's now you have the keys to the castle. The castle that I know about. And I would love some questions, comments. Oh, good. Mike is gonna answer.
Thank you, Laura.
Yeah.
Trish has a question.
I'm wondering, why did you have someone else publish your book rather than having your own publishing company publish your book? Because you're a traditional press, right? You're just small press.
Trish
Yep.
wants to know if you had somebody else publish your book. I'm gonna repeat questions so folks that are cool. Trish wants to know why you had someone else publish your book instead of you publishing it yourself.
I am awkward and anxious as a human being. And when my debut novel was out on submission, I knew I wanted someone else to be its cheerleader. I felt like if I published it myself, I would get too much in my own way. And I decided that I would do the same thing for my second novel. But meanwhile, Imagine a Door, my book for publishers, came out with Forest Avenue. And it turns out I was right. I was a nervous wreck. I know my stuff. I know what's in the book, and I had amazing people agree to be interviewed for it. But when it came to sending it out for reviews and publicity, I just did a deer in the headlights panic. I just was like, wait, I have to send this out. People are going to judge it. Wait, people are going to read it. I knew this, right? That's what publishing is about. But it was so hard for me. So I hired a publicist to help me because I felt like if I didn't do that and bring somebody else into the fold to push the words out and push the story out to reviewers and other people who might be interested, that I was not actually going to do enough on my own. So that was the line I drew. Imagine a Door at Forest Avenue makes sense because it's a small press book. It is full of small press quotes. My agent started shopping it around to New York publishers, and we got we got one really mean comment about it, not there not being a market for it, and we're like, well, that doesn't make sense. But it was enough for me to realize nobody in New York wants to publish a book full of small press authors and publishers, because that was the whole point. I wanted the book to be about us and not just another book, from people who have already become famous. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to do the outsider's guide to publishing. So that's what I did. And then the new book, yeah, I just decided that the Neighborhood Dames needed to go to someone else. And part of that was developmental editing. I could hire my own editor, but ultimately if I published it myself, I would be making those decisions for me. Um, and I really wanted someone outside eyes to take it and to believe in the book and love it and shout out about it so that then I could go out and promote it also.
In vetting, make sure that you've vetted your paid developmental editor, or if you have properly vetted that, what comes to mind when you are saying?
So what do you mean by properly vetting developmental editor?
I think I heard that. You broke up a little and then you repeated it
I'm
too.
sorry. The question is, what do you mean by properly vetting your developmental editor?
Great question. I tend to recommend a few developmental editors because I've worked with them multiple times. And I think any author who is actively writing and publishing can let you know who they've worked with and what it was like. In terms of general qualifications, many editors will offer sample pages. And if they don't outrightly offer that on their website, I would ask, even if you could get a couple pages of editing from them, you would get a sense of their personality. You saw the bits and pieces that I shared of the Ooligan edit on my book and my edits on Vincent's book. It's very personality responsive. And so you can at least get a sense of who that person is and if they like your material. And I really believe that the best developmental editors say no when it's not a fit. I'm not sure everybody does that. If someone is just starting out and they don't have a lot of experience, they might say yes just for the paycheck. But in general, if it's not a fit, the editor should say no. And I think you can learn that from a developmental edit. Some editors also offer phone calls in advance to talk over your goals. I think that's less common, but it's definitely one option. I would be more inclined to take a small sample of edits over a phone call, just because it's such a textual job. And then the other thing is look at the endorsements. Are people on the editor's website? Well, does the editor have a website? That's number one. Number two, are there people on the editor's website who have shared testimonials about how great it was to work with them? And then can you do a deep Google search or DuckDuckGo search and find anybody that this person has worked with who has gotten published? My friends at Three Penny Editor, I'll put that in the chat. My friend Sarah Cipher started her own editorial business years ago. She's been doing it on her own. She started her own firm maybe 20 years ago. And after a couple years, she started having clients sell their books, get agents and sell their books to big five companies. And if that's the kind of deal you're looking for, if that's the path you want, you should be looking for a developmental editor who has worked on books that have sold to big houses. And same with small presses. If you know you've written a small press book and you really want to work with a small press, then looking for developmental editors who are into growing and building what you've written when that's maybe out of the box, or maybe it has a strange structure, or it has an interesting premise that that's original and a little bit weird. You'll want to look for that kind of editor.
To piggyback off of that, if you are planning on working with the developmental editor for querying agents, does that process of obtaining one generally involve formal query-like submissions, or does it tend to be more informal conversations between editor and author?
If you're contacting a developmental editor, does it involve the classic query style, or do you just contact them and go over?
I I think most editors with websites have a note about how to contact them, and they'll usually say like what they're looking for, just like an agent or an editor. My guess is that most of them would like to know a little bit about what the book's about, and also um what your goals are. And if there's no information, that's totally what I would do. I would say the title of the book. Absolutely, they want to know how many words it is. Because if you're querying a 200,000 word manuscript and it's a cozy mystery, and most cozy mysteries are 70,000 words, I'm just making up numbers, but let's say cozy mysteries are on the shorter side usually, and your cozy mystery is 200,000 words, that tells the editor the kind of work that they're going to need to do, or that you haven't done the research on your genre. And either that developmental editor gets really excited about doing that kind of slimming down work, or they say, actually, this is not my thing. Come back when it's 70,000 words. So I think the title, the word count, and then a description of what your book is about, and certainly the genre. And if you are on a particular timeline, you might tell that to the editor. But many editors work months in advance, and you're lucky to get a slot with the good ones. You're lucky to get a slot a couple months out. So I would I would use caution in suggesting timelines. But you could ask, you could say that here's my manuscript. Like, I'd love for you to look at my manuscript. This is the title, it's this many words, it's briefly about this, and it's this genre. And I'm curious about your timeline, or I'm hoping to have pages back by September because I have a writing retreat planned with my friends. You can be very open about your identity and experience, and what the experience you want out of it is.
How is AI changing the developmental ending?
What do you think about AI as far as developmental editing?
Say that again, sorry.
What do you think about AI as far as development editing?
Ah, this is a great question, and also I sighed. Um, I am pretty rigid when it comes to AI. I have pretty rigid feelings about it, because I am one of the people who AI the Atlantic article that came out a couple months ago, where you could look up which books had been fed into the AI machine. I forget which program it was, but a whole bunch of my Forest Avenue books were fed in, and my novel Singing Lessons was fed into the AI. So my first response is a very knee-jerk no. That being said, I do know, especially for writers with disabilities, being able to do a program like Grammarly, or use AI to help fix at the sentence level or catch typos. I mean, when we do spell check, isn't that AI, right? And I would recommend doing spell check. So therefore, my knee-jerk reaction, it's more nuanced than what I'd like to think. Um, I don't think at this time, and again, I am pretty anti AI, like I don't really use it except for search engines. But I think AI is not sophisticated in story structure in the same way that a human would be. I would imagine that if you tried to get a developmental edit from AI, there might be some good ideas. Um, and it might eventually be able to help you pick a title, not just because of what your material is, but because of what people are searching online. So I do think that from a marketing standpoint, there's going to be more and more possibilities and information and interest in using AI for figuring out how to talk about books. Um, but at least at this time, I don't think that an AI edit of a book, I mean, maybe for copy editing more or proofreading, like it could confirm that the word mom or dad was popular in whatever time versus doing a big picture look at your book in a way that a human would do it.
Interesting times. Great.
Mhm.
All right, Laura, thank you very much. This has been amazing. Another round of applause.
Thank you all so much for your time today, and I hope to see some of you on Sunday.
We'll post those slides along with this recording probably in a couple of days. And as I said, there's still room for the workshop on Sunday. You can sign up on the website. And I'm looking forward to seeing you on Sunday. All
Thank you
right,
so much.
thanks. Those of us who are still here are gonna hang out and chat with each other and eat snacks and take a look at Joan's artwork over here and ask Joan any questions that you have. And just generally be convivial. Thanks everyone for coming.